Welcome to class. Congratulations, you get me another week in a row. We do expect Eric will be back next Friday. For anyone who is looking to him as the course faculty with questions about the class, assignments, recordings, please know that your patience is appreciated. Roosh, the IA, will continue to field the questions that he can. I'm here to help as well. But we are trying to take very good care of Eric as he needed to miss another class period today. So help join us in taking care of Eric, and know that your flexibility and patience are much appreciated. But without further ado, let's see here. I believe we've got a couple of announcements submitted. So our friends, the student organization Empowered, which is one of the student orgs that CFE sponsors, they are hosting Makeathon this weekend. Makeathon is a 36-hour-long production design competition open to undergraduate and graduate students from all 19 colleges at the University of Michigan. It kicks off today and runs through Sunday, February 7th. In past years, students collaborated in teams to create projects ranging from autonomous vehicles to automatic sandwich makers to Alexa integration with Double Map and beyond. This year, Makeathon is virtual and it is split into two competitions: a computer-aided design contest and an open product design contest. Teams can choose to participate in one of the two competitions, which are both virtual in nature. For the open product design contest teams, each presenting team will get reimbursed for up to $125 as participants need to prepare their own materials, which they can do by purchasing supplies locally wherever they are. There is $3,000 in total prize money split between the two contests. Teams of 2 to 6 members or even solo participants can enter. While it begins today, it's not too late to sign up if you want to push your limits and give it a try. If you have any further questions or even completely new to either entrepreneurship or engineering, feel free to email empowered.makeathon@umich.edu. So there is that slide. The next slide I wanted to share is from Start Michigan's only student-run startup incubator. Start UM's curriculum has 4 key phases, from ideation workshops to Start grants for founders. They will take you through every step of the startup journey. If you are interested in bringing an idea to life or joining a project in the next cohort, apply at startum.co. All right, I guess commercial interlude over. I would invite this entire class to join me in welcoming Tyson Gersh, the founder and president of Michigan Urban Farming Initiative. Tyson, we are applauding you from our homes, our apartments, our car, our cell phone. Tyson's urban farming idea was hatched when he was in Detroit as a student research assistant to the Urban Community Oral Health Project. As Tyson interviewed more than 200 women who relied on the services of WIC, he saw the relationship between socioeconomic status and food security. 10 years ago, Tyson co-founded the Michigan Urban Farming Initiative. This included the purchase of a building in the North End community of Detroit surrounded by vacant land. The building has since been remodeled. The land is an active urban farm, and MUFI is now a registered 501c3 nonprofit. I'm calling it MUFI, Tyson. I hope you will correct me if I'm wrong. MUFI promotes education, sustainability, and community to empower Detroit. The millions of dollars worth of residential investment around MUFI isn't too shabby either. They have formed numerous partnerships with global brands such as BASF, the Scott's Miracle-Gro Company, and General Motors. MUFI serves as a model for redevelopment in other urban communities across the map. I challenge students to see themselves in Tyson. While he was an undergrad pursuing a psych degree, he volunteered at an Ann Arbor high school. He co-implemented a course in neuroscience and web-based media. He also served as the director of development for Optimize Social Innovation Challenge. And in addition now, as a young man, he owns Polycraft, a freelance 3D modeling and printing service. So everyone, let's give a big Wolverine welcome to Tyson Gersh. Tyson, I apparently am driving the slides. So I'm going to start with the CFE mantra and mute myself so you can take over.
So I take it I just tell you to go to the next slide kind of thing?
Apparently you do. Last week we enjoyed telling Nick what to do. This week you get to enjoy telling me what to do.
Sounds good. Cool. So thanks for having me. It's funny when you hear your bio that you haven't updated in a while, and you're like, oh man, I remember I wrote that so many years ago. It's just a good reminder that I need to update things. So I'm Tyson, and yeah, I'm the co-founder and president of Muffy. I call it Muffy. You can kind of call it whatever you want to call it. I don't know if the way I say it is grammatically correct. I just thought it kind of sounded like muffin, which felt nice. In terms of how our organization can fit into this theme of try, risk, fail, do, we have so many examples because I think the process of starting something up, it's just inherently full of failure, and kind of learning how to pivot or kind of get around that failure like often is more or less what's going to determine whether or not you'll be able to get your thing where you're trying to go. For us, or I guess next slide, please. Yes, let's see. So initially, we had this like big ambition. We wanted to do this big statewide sort of urban ag organization. We initially started, we had stuff going on in Ann Arbor, Manchester, and Detroit. We ultimately decided to focus our efforts exclusively on Detroit through the establishment of a 3-acre campus. I guess we can go to the, risk. Sorry, I'm like, yeah, if we could go next and then next again. Yeah, oh, one more forward. This is the campus that we operate on, and I'm really happy to say that we today own all of the land. But when we started, we only owned these 3 parcels in the dark green that are kind of in the center to the right. And at the time, it was the previous mayor, Coleman Young, if I remember correctly, and there was sort of this unspoken understanding that if you went through the city's Adopt a Lot program, you would have legal right to maintain property. And if you could demonstrate good stewardship over a number of years, then you would be the first person. They basically sell you the property for $1. And this had been the case across a lot of different situations. This is what was told to us by city government. And so we heard that and we were like, all right, we're going to just blow this out of the water. We're going to do such a good job that no one will ever be able to say that we didn't just kill it. And we'll be able to secure site control to this entire campus. So we did that. We went nuts. We hosted, to date, I think we're at over like 12,000 volunteers who put in over like 100,000+ hours of volunteer service. A lot of those are repeat volunteers. We put in, basically every dollar we got, we invested into this space. A couple years into doing this, it's like going really well. We're making really good progress. We have all sorts of affirmation from, various departments across city government saying that we're doing everything well. But then the administration changed, and the sort of, I guess, economic context that our work existed in became very different. And they decided that the land that we were on was very valuable all of a sudden. And if we could skip ahead to the image with the 2 maps side by side, I think it's slide 14. What happened was, our location, we're pretty far away from everything. We're in what's considered the Fringe development loop, which is sort of this little border around, I forget the name of the map now, but basically the powers that be got together and decided that this was like that there was this certain geographic area that all of the investment was going to be focused on, and we were not in it. And that was a good thing for us. But then they decided to do this Q line, which was this big public transit initiative that runs down Woodward. You can kind of see this orange line to the left. The star to the bottom, that's downtown. The star at the top is our location. And basically, you can see the terminal for the Q line from where our location is, which all of a sudden meant that urban farming could no longer be an appropriate land use for this location. And overnight, it became illegal for us to exist on the space that we were on. And I guess that was like really hard, right? Detroit has a very top-down sort of government power structure. And if you're kind of not aligned with the city plan, it's like a really not good place to be. So the reasons why we decided to kind of double down on this, I guess we'll skip forward now to the what did you do portion. And so I guess like that was a failure, right? I mean, we were told by multiple people in city government, like, you will never own this land. It is illegal for you to be here. If you don't agree to sort of relocate yourself, we will make sure that you cease to exist. And I mean, some of the language that was used was very aggressive. It was, and for us, a group of, young people in their 20s mostly with not a lot of resources, it was like really stressful. But we decided kind of as a group that if our organization could sort of be disappeared overnight like that, then that didn't, how do I put it? That didn't set a very promising precedent for our neighbors. There's a lot of people that have maybe ambiguous ownership or ambiguous right to be on their property in our neighborhood. And we felt it was really important being sort of on the corner and sort of in that first line of where the development and investment would sort of head, that we kind of held the line, for lack of a better term. So we tried to sort of reposition our brand quite a bit. Instead of just being like an organization that grows food and sort of like targets hunger, we wanted to be something that could align with the municipal objectives. So if their goal is to promote density, and like, I'm not disparaging them when I say this, because I think if you spend any amount of time really looking at the city's financial situation, the only sort of equation that works out in the city's favor is for there to be more people that pay taxes. Solvency is really important in the city of Detroit right now. The city was built for 2 million people. It lost like 3/4 of that. And the infrastructure simply can't be maintained. The people can't get services unless there are people paying into that system. It's just like a really hard situation to overcome. So we were never anti this idea around density, but we also didn't believe that our existence was necessarily in addition to that. So we kind of really started thinking about it and realizing that over the past few years, we had been effectively orchestrating a degree of development that you might not see otherwise. You look at a lot of the housing stock in our neighborhood, you've got a ton of over 100-year-old housing. It's super expensive to repair. And if you were to put all of the money into it that's needed to get it functional, and then you tried to sell it, you'd end up losing money. So the only way to basically not knock down houses is to find people that are willing to lose money. And the people that are willing to lose money are people that are willing to pay for a certain kind of lifestyle. And it turned out the novelty of this urban ag campus right next to transit, sort of like adjacent to the downtown area, was enough of a perk that people were willing to take on these homes as passion projects. And these are unoccupied homes that haven't been occupied in decades at the time that I'm talking about. And so we started like getting the numbers around all of this and found that these are literally people that would tell you straight to the face, I only bought this house because this urban farm is right here. I just wanted to live next to it. I wanted to have like my dream life. And collectively that number, now I forget off the top of my head, but it was almost like $2 million. And so the argument became that if the city wants to see density here, then our existence is actually going to help them achieve that objective above and beyond what they would be able to accomplish if they just cleared us out and built a bunch of apartments. And we started looking into some of the urban planning and development literature and found this kind of concept of agrihoods, which is the idea that you would leverage agricultural space to achieve a higher degree of density or development or investment around it. It's kind of like if you look at New York City and you stare at Central Park, all of the buildings around the perimeter of the park are much bigger than all of the buildings further away from the park, right? That's because people want to live next to green space. Turns out it's like really powerful. And we see this across a lot of industries. People are willing to pay a premium just to have green in their lives. Although green isn't necessarily going to make money in and of itself, but it is going to enhance the performance of everything around it. And so I guess we can go to the next slide. First and foremost, we wanted to make sure that we had objective and indisputable support in our neighborhood. So I personally went through and you can see this little map. This one's a little outdated, but we got 85% of every occupied property. And then it was something like 90% of every non-city owned vacant lot. So basically all the property owners, the majority of the property owners and the majority of the actual residents of the neighborhood signed a petition or sort of letter of support saying, we like this here, we want to see this here in sort of perpetuity. There was like 10 columns on it. And basically it was very unambiguous. Like, this is something that this community wants. There's no argument against it. And when you're looking at this map right here, you have to remember that 30% of those lots are just owned by the city, so they aren't even occupied. And then I'm trying to remember, this is a really outdated version. It's just the only one that I had in my Google Drive. But we demonstrated the vast majority of stakeholders in our neighborhood were in support of our existence and our continued existence. If we want to do the next slide. We had already sort of had a history of working with big organizations, and that really just was the product of our organization being run by a bunch of college kids at the time who didn't have traditional professional networks, but were kind of ahead of the general population at social media. And it was a time where a lot of these corporate sort of philanthropic funds were being placed into these crowd favorite, whoever gets the most votes kind of competitions. And we proved to be really good at winning those kinds of things. And so we'd already had a few connections to larger companies from contests that we won, the Scott's Miracle-Gro Company being one of them. And then we kind of doubled down on that. We partnered with BASF, which is a big chemical company that's not really a public-facing brand, but is sort of an enormous player in the sustainability industry, especially when you think about construction materials. You don't get sustainability without high-performance chemistry. And we sort of use that as an opportunity for them to both strengthen their own relationships with other vendors across the supply chain. So instead of just like a normal meeting where, BASF is talking to GM about like a spray foam that will reduce the decibels of echoing in the like car seats, you create a situation where, you have both companies just volunteering out in the city. You're building relationships a little more organically. And it turned out to be really beneficial for BASF and their stakeholders. So we kind of doubled down on this and used our building as a sort of opportunity for them to showcase all of the products across the sustainable construction technology supply chain that they contribute to, and to strengthen their relationships. And that was partly because it was useful for us to get our community center rehabbed, and partly because we know that the city is desperate for big industry, and having that group of stakeholders at the table invested in our existence was really important for us. What's our next slide? Can we go to that? Oh, okay. And then, so then we did this like big announcement. Media was like the next sort of angle of this. And we did this like America's first sustainable urban agri-hood, which it technically was, because the agri-hoods in existence are usually in rural areas. We were the first sort of truly urban version. And we were doing this like LEED Platinum designation on our building. And we had like a bunch of criteria that we met for ourselves to make that claim. And it just kind of blew up. And we were really good about tracking it. I think in the first year we had over 1,000 unique publications, and I just like went nuts, making sure we documented every part of it. We can go to the next page. Like from the actual instances of publications to the traffic that each of those generated. I mean, we have like videos that were created with millions of views. The ones that we were in performed really well. Within the last month of the year, one of our stories was like the third most read in the major development publication for the city. And it's not so much like saying like we're really popular, as much as it is being able to demonstrate the value for the companies that we were working with, right? And the city. So being able to show them sort of like objectively, like, hey, look at all this attention that your products are getting, compare this against the analytics for your last marketing campaigns or some of the other ones that you currently have running, and look how little money you've spent on this compared to us. And I think the big sort of theme here was just showing people how much better our existence can be for them, and being really intentional about how we documented that. Let's see, what's our next slide? So I guess like with all of this in mind, we were eventually able to change the city's mind, which seemed like a really insurmountable thing for a really long time. And that's kind of how we did it. 10 minutes.
There we go. I'm unmuted. Tyson, they get us. I'm no longer sharing screen. Everyone gets to see you, see me now. Thank you very much for that presentation and going with the flow. Yeah, the split screen and us filling in for Eric. There's a steep learning curve right here. So thank you.
Every time I feel like every time I get on an online meeting, I don't remember how to do it. My camera malfunctions, my mic malfunctions. It's not seamless yet.
It will be. I'm sure for the students there are. And in the chat, they've fielded they put some questions up because early on in your presentation, Peter Barr, he asked a really good question. Why are you farming in an urban area when you can buy cheap farmland anywhere else in the state?
So, sorry, that's my dog. Sorry, she's gonna keep barking, it's driving me nuts. There's like a bunch of cats that live next door to us. We're in Detroit right now, actually across the street from the campus. And there's a lot of wildlife, which is great, except for when you're on Zoom calls and your dog is like into wildlife. So that's a really good question. And if I'm being honest, if you asked me that question when we started the organization, I would have said, oh, well, even, like the food industry is really good at producing food, but we like throw most of it away. And there is like a big disconnect in access. And while that food may be getting produced, it's not making it into the city. And that's like partly my perspective now, but if I'm being very honest about it, I don't think that urban farming is so much about producing food so much as it is about the wide number of spaces that it kind of improves. If our goal was just to solve hunger, which is not as much of an issue in America as we kind of might think it is, yes, if our goal was to solve hunger, like we would just spend every dollar we got, like investing in Soylent or something, or growing produce out in fields in rural areas where land is super cheap. where you can benefit from economies of scale and just be efficient in a way that you could never achieve in an urban space. But I think it's more about placemaking, right? It is about the sort of like economic context. It's about when COVID happens, this being a space where people can still socialize and like interact and have an improved quality of life that they might not have access to otherwise. I think it's the just tons of random services we end up providing, from, you know, helping residents with exterior property maintenance, simply because we have a large volunteer base that we can leverage to kind of meet these case by case needs kind of on demand. And so I think of ourselves not so much as like a food producer, so much as a resource provider. That may not be exactly how I wanted to say that, but I hope my point is communicated.
You wear a lot of hats.
You have to be if you want to be effective, right?
Mm-hmm. In terms of the food that's grown, who gets it though? I guess is my question.
Food is made available for free for anybody who wants it. We do roughly 300 different varieties every year across, it's 300 different varieties. We average about 20,000 pounds. We do track everything. That's our only thing, is you just tell us the address you're going to eat it at, and you can make something up. We usually say, give us the next door address or something, like your street name or something. Mm-hmm. We track all of that, and the majority of it ends up going within 1 square mile of the site. But we do have like a good mix. I mean, people come from like other cities. Sometimes it's tourists from other countries that are staying here temporarily. There's a big mix, but it is all free. That's
awesome. And I was going to say, have you guys thought about partnering with any farmers markets? Like Detroit Farmers Market's huge, but have you taken it down there?
Actually we supplied a market, a few of them, for the first few years of our existence. The reality is, like, agriculture it's not like profitable at this scale, right? I mean, it's a commodity market. The food system only works with subsidies and economies of scale. Like the amount of profit you make per transaction is so small that you really have to have just millions of transactions for it to make any sense. You know, if we're doing 20,000 pounds and we did like all organic heirloom tomatoes, and we were selling them, not giving them away, but selling them for the highest amount we could get, something like Whole Foods, right? We'd make like $5 a pound. And what is that, like $100,000 a year with no losses or labor costs? And you're telling me that that's the best that a 3-acre campus in a downtown area can produce? I mean, you end up losing money. And that was one of a couple reasons why we decided to make it free early on. The second being that our community very overwhelmingly told us that if it was for the community, then it should be free. We were like, hey, there was no money to be made anyways, so let's go. And we'll just never pretend that this could be a revenue source for us.
Right. Okay, also in the chat, I see, Zarif, you're asking, do you think urban farming could be reverse engineered to help rural areas gain more equitable access to resources that are primarily in cities? That's an interesting spin.
I mean, what resources would you say are mostly in cities and not rural areas? Like utilities? Or they can hear me and respond to that, right?
I'm looking to see if he is going to respond. You're posing a good question back. I don't know if you can track. Yeah, utilities and healthcare, he just said.
So I don't know. I mean, like, so we do have an example of a blighted home that we deconstructed and converted the basement into a rainwater harvesting cistern. That we're trying to sort of like do a second phase of, where the local or the nearby structures are getting funneling all of the rainwater runoff into that cistern. But that's more of a uniquely city utility challenge, right? Because cities are overwhelmed with rainwater runoff, and I mean, 2/3 of your water bill right now is the charge you get for the amount of water that goes down the drain, not the water that you're actually consuming, right? So, but in the rural area, we don't have the drainage fees.
Okay, now that's interesting. And on your website is
The
a
other
really good
one,
description of that with a photo and how you did reclaim the basement, and it speaks on the water reclamation there. Which, speaking of reclaiming that basement, another question in the chat from Nicholas is asking, did you run into any problems with the fertility of the urban soil, or anything from urban pollution affecting the crops?
We get this question almost anytime we talk anywhere. So the reality is that contamination, the perception around contamination has done a really good job marketing itself, because everyone is always asking us this question. Yes, it was like one of the first things we did. Not only was our soil well below the parts per million that the USDA requires to plant and grow and consume tubers, which are the most vulnerable to soil contaminants, it was super nutrient rich. It's something like 90% of residential, like previously residential space is going to be the same situation. There was like a study that I read a few years ago that was basically like, you're only going to die if it was like used for industry, but housing isn't so much the case. Had it tested, we were not only okay on that, but it was in really good shape. And that's because there was like 20 years of vegetative overgrowth, just accumulating and composting and doing really great things for the soil.
Thank you. Another question from Jessica in the chat. Have you watched your company directly benefit from the pandemic? And I think this is a good question, right? Because a lot of people,
No, it's been horrible.
No.
We've seen a dramatic increase in the need of our services, and we've lost 90% of our probably like 93%. I forgot the actual number because we do track this too, but we lost like 93% of our labor. We had almost no volunteers last year. And almost all of our donations just evaporated because times are tight. And it's been really, really hard, to be honest, but the need is still there. Mm-hmm. It's more there than ever.
Wow. Another question and comment in chat from Grace. Grace said her brother and mother helped as a volunteer group at the farm, and B, that you guys started out as a volunteer organization. Are you still? So.
I didn't yell at anybody. Sometimes I'm intense during the work days, which is like why I don't run volunteer days anymore. Yeah, so we did have an employee last year. We'd finally kind of gotten all that together, and it was good. But then the money just ran out. The pandemic hit, and even the sort of supplemental income we had to sort of support that budget came from people whose money was in the stock market. And when that tanked, of course it then like came back after, but the money didn't come back, unfortunately. Yeah, still volunteer. It sucks.
Well, you've got a captive audience right here if they're in the area. Yeah, and actually someone's asking anonymously, how are you making a profit then, if we may be so bold?
There isn't a profit, I think, to be made at this stage. Our long-term plan, right? Like it's not like we haven't thought about sustainability in our revenue model. We are in the process of getting this center renovated. When it's sort of all said and done, it will include a for-profit kind of farm-themed cafe, some residential, some office space, because again, I think it's like the value of the space is the thing to capitalize on. The view is really nice. There are a lot of businesses that are in sort of similar or adjacent spaces that benefit from being at a location like this. I mean, we have just the traffic from tourism we get alone is enough for somebody to want to locate themselves here. So wow. That is how we will eventually make a profit, but we're working towards it.
Okay. Yeah. One of the comments, branding, branding. I love it. Oh, someone else is asking you to show your dog. Maybe if they bark again. Although if yours start, mine are going to start.
What are you doing? Do you want to say hi to people? Come here. Oh, yeah, very good. I don't know if you can see her. This is my love of my life. Her name is Tuna. She's a shepherd.
That's awesome. Okay, someone has done some digging on you. What have you learned as a precinct delegate, and what are your main goals as a politician?
So I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm still a precinct delegate. It is one of the most sort of like completely not regulated spaces ever. It was on my bucket list to be like a publicly elected official, and that was sort of my like my efforts to cross that off, which I've done. So I'm also the secretary of our block club, which basically encompasses the same area that the precinct like delegate geography does. And the job is basically to make sure that people that are Democrats are registering to vote and voting. And so during our block club meetings, I just made sure everybody was registered to vote. And they told me they voted. I didn't like physically force them to or anything, but yeah, my long-term ambitions as a politician are to stay as far away from politics as possible. I, over the last decade, have really realized I don't have the stomach for bureaucracy or I think like interpersonal drama. I think that they're both just distractions from value, and I'd rather focus my time and energy on creating value. As a politician, I never want to be one. I think it's like an inherently broken space.
And yeah, and I didn't know if that's where you and Eric, the course faculty, had a good synergistic attitude about that. The students would be hearing Eric espouse a great deal right now. So, so thank you for sharing.
Eric at U of M Dearborn, I did both U of M Ann Arbor, and I transferred to Dearborn just to like finish out my degree. And Eric was really helpful in my conflict with the bureaucracy there, actually.
Yeah, he's helpful to a lot of us. But clearly, you have a passion to fight the bureaucracy in what you're doing with Muffy. I mean, in terms of, you know, the legwork you did to pull those maps and those records. That's huge. Okay, moving down the list for the students. Oh, okay. This one's an anonymous. If the purpose of urban agriculture is not for food, why not just make it an urban park like Central Park?
University. We're actually kitty corner from a park. It's called the Loris Bennett Park. She's one of our founding members. She passed away a couple years ago. She's sort of the matriarch of our neighborhood. Really amazing woman. If you ever hear of the Adopt a Child program in Detroit, please support it. It was one of her legacy projects. But I'd see us as being kind of complementary to park space. I don't think the farm is the best place for people to be like running around or playing Frisbee. I think it's just a different iteration of what urban green space can look like that adds a different kind of value. We have a lot of grass in America. Like, it's nice to have something else.
No, that's powerful. And we're getting a lot in the chat. Can I get involved? How can I get involved?
Do open volunteer days every Saturday, 10 to 4. We, for the first time ever, have kind of paused them over the winter time. We used to just literally go out and shovel people's walks or whatever, but I'm tired and I'm doing other things too. So we'll probably kick that back up in, I'd say like April. So open volunteering, you do not need to contact us in advance. We actually ask that you don't, because we get really inundated with emails and we're low on administrative sort of capacity. And I mean, you some money right now. So if you are able to donate or facilitate other people donating, please feel free to do that. And I know that's not the fun thing that everybody wants to hear, and it's not as special, but it is what's needed.
Okay, and then you answered part of this question, what do you do in the winter? But do you grow anything in the winter?
Luckily, we've done a little bit of everything. We have worked on renovating. We have our big building. We have a home that we built out of a shipping container. We have an intern house, and we would just kind of work on those projects. And we do we start everything indoors. I'm pointing that way. You can't see, but like towards the back, there's a big grow setup. It's not pot. Everybody thinks we grow pot. We do not grow pot. But we do like a ton of transplants, and it's also just like the one chance we have to catch up on administrative stuff, because in the summertime it's sun up to sundown. Days get really long.
What is one of your more memorable local resident interactions? Like what
I
sticks
was
with
reading a thing. Can you say it one more time? I was reading.
What sticks with you in terms of like the local residents? I mean, I know right now is a time to catch your breath, but you've been at it for 10 years. What are some of the poignant moments when you think about like that was a meaningful, impactful exchange? I did something right for the residents.
A lot of that. So the funny or the interesting thing about being in a space for a really long time is that you get to know people. Like people really become your friends, they're part of your community, and you've had a long enough time to both like really touch people and really piss them off, right? Because you're not just having this like sort of unidirectional relationship. I live here too. You know, we get together and we bitch about things constantly, just with the block club. But I know, so I say that because every time I think of a touching moment, and then I'm like, then there was that one time, right? And it's sort of like dilutes the magic of it, but I won't talk about
Okay, and that's
parts.
another question. Like what are the negative interactions you've had?
It's so complicated here. Detroit is a really complex city. So, I mean, one example, we have a senior citizen resident who lives alone. She's on a fixed income. She's been in her house for forever. And she got a nuisance abatement, or she got nuisance abated, which is basically where the city says the exterior of your property is not up to the city's property maintenance ordinance. And we are going to charge you money for that. And if you don't sign this thing that basically gives us the permission to manage your property, then we are going to sue you to take your property from you. It's actually really aggressive. It is something that I feel very strongly about. I think it's horrible. I cannot believe that people don't riot in the streets over stuff like this. I think if this happened in Ann Arbor, like the government would be overthrown like in 24 hours. And so we were able to, and you can fight these things and they usually give up if you fight aggressively, but you got to have a lot of time and energy and sort of like wherewithal to navigate that space because they're really manipulative. I don't want to disparage anybody, although that is it's a really messed up program. Anyways, we were able to just over a weekend make all of the repairs on her property that were needed without it costing her any money, saving her a lot of stress. And, you know, if I'm being as dramatic as possible, potentially allow her to continue to be a resident of this community. Because in the worst case scenario, she could have lost her house. We would have, of course, never let that happen. We would have jumped in and advocated for her legally, but that's like one example. You know, and on the other end, we have another person, senior citizen, and you know, this is something that's the gentrification narrative in the city is really dominated by people that don't understand how development works. So in our community, which is historically Jewish and then historically Black-owned properties, it had one of the highest concentrations of Black-owned homes in the city and in the city was of the country. You've got a lot of people who own and are upside down on their mortgages. So, you know, you think about America, I mean, like sort of the cornerstone of building wealth in America is through owning your home, right? You buy your house, it accumulates wealth, you sell it, you've made money. It's the thing that you finance your retirement with. It's the thing, the legacy that you leave your kids. And ownership of property is like really, really important, especially in this neighborhood for that reason. So we have one woman who, her property value when the recession happened in Detroit saw this really substantial amount of disinvestment, basically became like upside down on her mortgage. A home that she had financed at, I think it was like $400,000. The market value was, I think it was something like 20 grand when we first started our initiative. And through sort of the strategic investment that we helped support, I can't say we did all of it, but we were a really significant factor around it. Her property value went up enough that she was able to sell, and that was always her goal. I want to be really clear about this. This isn't displacement. This is somebody being able to collect the wealth that they have invested into, right? And is using that to finance her retirement in a senior living facility downtown, right? She didn't want to stay in her house because it's 3 stories. She hadn't been up the stairs in years. It was too big for her to maintain. She loves the neighborhood, but she's like, I don't want to live here anymore, but I can't afford to leave because I'm upside down in my house. And being able to kind of have that freedom was really important. And I stand by 100%. The work that we've done that was able to support her getting her autonomy. I think that's like really important and completely missing from the gentrification conversation.
Mm-hmm. No, that's huge. So some of the other questions in chat is what drew you to Detroit? What's keeping you in Detroit? And then the third prong, how do we get your momentum into other cities across America and throughout the world?
What drew me to Detroit was my co-founder, Darren, who was also an undergrad at U of M at the time. We met at a meeting for the Detroit Partnership. He's kind of like a really unusual guy. He's really smart, really hardworking. When I met him, and he was in college, he already owned property in the city of Detroit. He literally like graduated with a 4.0 and had saved up $60,000 and paid for all of his tuition by himself. Like he's just one of those people. He doesn't sleep. It constantly makes everyone around him feel like they're dysfunctional. You're like, I don't understand. He went into real estate development ultimately. He's not with the org anymore. Anyways, so we met and he was talking about that. I just saw a flyer for a thing that said community gardening. And I was like, I like gardening. And he had a bunch of tropical plants at his house. So we like hung out afterwards. And then we were like, we should do a thing. And that's kind of how we ended up in Detroit. And we ended up in this specific neighborhood because it was the only property that we didn't get outbid on in the tax auction. We bought the building initially for $5,000. And that's how that happened. What keeps us or me in Detroit, us, because this is like our home. This is where everything we're doing is now. I don't know if it's like sunk costs or that I see like a great future here. It's complicated. I mean, it's really complicated here. We had 9 break-ins this year, which is not normal. I think the pandemic has really pushed people to a degree of desperation that they haven't really been before. My car just got totaled, parked in front of my house by an inebriated driver 2 days later who didn't have insurance, and like my insurance company isn't covering it. So I just lost my car. Same thing happened to my neighbor across the street 2 days later. I mean, of like with here is just like so much higher than I think other areas. Although I haven't lived in other big cities, so like I can't really make that claim. It's higher than it was when I lived in Ann Arbor, which is where I'm from originally. But I don't know. I'm like 31. I own my own house. I have a really large amount of land around it. I couldn't afford to buy those things today, but I was really late to the buying things for myself game. But the fact that I managed to get in, it's huge for me. I mean, there's like nothing like owning your own place with no debt. it's great. And so I think for like that reason alone is just going to keep me here kind of like forever. I'm like, I'm never going to sell my house. Like, I don't, even if I don't live in it, like I will always own this property. I will always have it to fall back on. If I like, I don't know, go and decide to like wander around Alaska for years, like it'll be nice knowing that I always have a home somewhere. And I think it's really hard to kind of carve out a place for yourself in this world, like anywhere else. I am still in Detroit, and I mean, I'm just like too involved in everything, right? It's the block clubs, it's community groups. I mean, I'm like with like 4 different community neighborhood organizations. I don't think I've even had a chance to consider a life anywhere else. You're just too busy with Detroit stuff.
Well, you are an inspiration, and I hope the students, regardless of where they are, think about how they can get involved. And I think it's very rewarding to hear, you were drawn to a flyer, like so the students should be able to.
The
relate to
urinal,
that.
I was at the Ugly. I was studying for a final, and I was like, I don't want to study. I was literally, there was a flyer right above a urinal that I was forced to stare at, and I was like, oh, look, there's a community garden. And then I went to the meeting, and the rest was history.
Well, I hope everyone is inspired. Tyson, thank you.